Hello, hello, and we are live, I think. Welcome,
Excited to
everybody.
be.
Hi, Simon. How's it going?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
Good, good. Yeah, all good. Just a heads up, everybody. If you want to ask any questions, there should be a chat function over on the right-hand side. Feel free to stick your questions in. Hi, Nikolai. How's it going? And we'll either come to the questions as kind of as and when, or we can just leave it till the end. We'll just see how we go. All right, good stuff. Well, thanks for joining us, Simon. Do you want to kick things off? Just a quick introduction, kind of who you are, what you do,
Who am
that
I?
kind of
Yeah, the
thing.
classic
What
thing.
are you? Yeah.
So yeah, I'm Simon Barker. I sort of have, I guess, two roles in my life. I am CTO of a VC-backed startup here in the UK, kind of working in the architectural design sector, and then I am also, which is perhaps a bit more relevant to what we're talking about today, I am also the creator of All the Code, which started off as an Instagram account about software development, career changing, that kind of thing. Grew into quite a large Instagram account, a podcast, a website, a book about how to sort of get your first job in software development, and then more recently, a pretty hefty free 30 days of JavaScript course. All the content's completely free, like in-browser playgrounds, breaks everything down to like half-hour to 1 hour lessons on JavaScript every day. So I'm very much kind of in sharing the good word of software development.
Nice. It's a good way to put it. So, when did it all start? How did you get into it? What made you kind of make the leap? Were you always kind of, I guess, the sort of the cliche is, I was a child developer, and I've always been doing it, the sort of Mark Zuckerberg route, but it's not always the case. So, how did you get into tech?
Yeah, no. So I didn't release an app when I was 7.
Yeah, that is
Is
always.
Yeah. No, I was a pretty non-techie kid, to be honest. I was not very good with computers, particularly. I don't think I had my first computer that was like mine until midway through university. So I'd have been getting on for like 19 or so, something like that. And then I did a bachelor's and PhD in electrical engineering. And then off the back of that, I kind of realized halfway through my PhD that I was like, electrical engineers kind of need to code. It's like just one of those things. You need to generally be able to code, write embedded things, what have you. And so I started kind of doing kind of lab related coding. So LabVIEW is like a control software for controlling lab equipment. And then from there, I kept trying to need to drop down into C and like write a little function or something in LabVIEW that you couldn't do with the sort of drag and drop wires, because LabVIEW is like a visual programming language. And so then I took CS50, which is the Harvard course. And at this point, that would have been 14 years ago, 13, 14 years ago, I took CS50. It was just a list of files on iTunes U, and you could access Harvard's FTP server as a public user to download stuff. And it was nowhere near as sophisticated as CS50 is now. I've actually been recently just helping somebody through some of CS50, and seeing what they've grown it to now is just phenomenal. It's like a whole thing, and it's all still completely free. You can pay for the course, like the pro certificate, whatever, but it's still this amazing free kind of introduction and foundation to computer science. And yeah, I did it, like I said, like 14 years ago. And that was my third attempt at learning to code. I think I'd given up twice before, and that was finally the one that stuck. And I think it was entirely because of David Malin, the lecturer / professor that takes that course. Like, his just enthusiasm, his way of explaining things, him using analogies, and also not shying away from like hard things, but saying, yeah, it's hard, but let's break it down. Let's get into the nitty gritty and let's build your knowledge and understanding. And then, yeah, I guess I was hooked at that point, and then just started writing little tools for myself and learning PHP and CodeIgniter, which was the framework from back then, and then HTML and CSS, and then iOS development, and then some embedded stuff, and then JavaScript, like sort of back-end Node and what have you. Never got around to learning Ruby on Rails, although I am in the sweet spot for like learning to be a web developer, and Ruby on Rails being like I should have done, but it was always like number 3 on my list, and other things kept kind of getting in. So so there you go. That's my kind of coding origin story.
Nice. Yeah, Ruby on Rails has never been something I've touched as well. I'm always quite interested. So one of the challenges that we always get, so, and we hear it a lot from our users, is, I've done a course, I can build a few apps now, I can kind of actually, I guess, put pen to paper or actually write down some lines of code and get a product that you can use and looks like something. How do you actually translate that into finding a job then? Because again, as an employer, I guess one of the challenges is, okay, we've got a grad, they've done a boot camp or they've done a course, or like you said, they can actually deliver something. How do you encourage that employer to take the leap and trust you enough to say, right, okay, that's our next junior software engineer hire?
Yeah, the first thing is it's incredibly challenging because the amount of people trying to get into software development it's frustrating. There are more jobs than there are people that can code, but employers have gotten increasingly picky across every industry. They no longer want to bring people in and train them up. Everybody must hit the ground running, even if it's like your paper round when you're 12, you're expected to just hit the ground running, right? And then there's even more so. You've graduated, you've got a degree, you've got a boot camp, like you want to hit the ground running. And it's like, well, no, it takes a bit of time. So what you need to show them is that you have an ability to ship something, right? That's often like the big stepping stone of like people actually shipping something onto the actual internet or onto the actual app store to show that you've got over I had an idea, I started noodling, and then it petered out, right? Because software development is challenging. Being in a job doing software development is challenging, and they're employing you to do one thing. They're employing you to solve business problems. The tool you happen to use is code. If you don't ever ship the code, if you don't ever actually wield the tool that you claim to use, you're not actually solving business problems. And the only way you can demonstrate that is to say, look, I had an idea. It doesn't need to be world changing. It can be a to-do list application. That is fine. You're not trying to found a startup here. You're trying to make something to prove that you can ship some code. And then you show them that it's out in the world. You had the bravery to put something online. That will put you ahead of the vast majority of people that have never shipped something and actually put it online. And no, the group project you did in the third year of uni or week 16 of your boot camp with 5 other people doesn't count. It needs to be something that you did. And then depending on what it is you want to do, whether it is a front-end developer, back-end developer, DevOps, whatever it is, the project that you shipped kind of has to be relevant to the area that you're going into, or at least be able to demonstrate that there's stuff in there related. And then that gives you the thing that you can talk about. Hey, I discovered this problem while I was doing this. And actually, I've got 5 users somehow for my weird to-do list application. I've got 5 users, or I've had somebody test it. I've had a senior engineer play around with it, and they identified these bugs that I missed, and this is how I solved it. Like showing that you're able to change and adapt and use code to solve problems. That's what you need to show. Unfortunately, it is as simple as that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Again, everybody likes to talk about the theory behind tech and programming, but as an employer, you're building products. You want your products to be used by the actual living people. So again, I completely agree. If you can put something out there where, okay, I had an idea, I got it out there, I got a couple of users using it, that's going to put you miles ahead of everybody, like miles and miles ahead. What was your first idea then? Can you remember what the initial?
So I was in a PhD. My wife was in a PhD. We didn't have a lot of money, but we needed to start saving for a house and kind of getting our financial situation in order, which is not easy when you're sort of paying rent and you're trying to sort of balance everything and you're earning about 50p a day because it's a PhD stipend. And I was like, well, I'd like a way to like manage our finances a bit better. And my wife had come up with this like card system where at the start of every month, she'd get a physical card, write what the thing was, like food and the budget for the month, and then each time we bought something we would manually write on the card with like a debit. Like it was like it's called the envelope system. Basically, you can imagine having cash in the envelopes and taking it out. And sure, there were financial tools, and mint.com was a thing by this point, plenty of budgeting things, Quicken also, but none of them quite worked how I wanted them to work. And so I was like, you know what, let's just make a little PHP app that I can use on my machine that's essentially the digital version of those cards. I started with a login form because lots of applications need you to log in. Then I did it without any kind of like graphics or anything. It was just literally just like black text on a white background of all the different categories, and you could add a category and add a transaction, and then that forced me to learn about databases and how to do joins and how to link everything together across the back end and how to regenerate the screen. And this was back in the server-side rendered days, although server-side rendering seems to be coming back in. So there was no React. It was just HTML, CSS, and a bit of JavaScript. And then as that initial MVP started to work, my proof of concept that my wife and I used on my computer, I was like, well, I should buy a domain name for this and actually put it up. So I bought the domain name spentby.me. It's not a thing anymore. So it was like short for Spent By Me. And then I actually learned Bootstrap. I think I used Foundation actually, because Foundation had just come out before Bootstrap. So I used a CSS framework, and slowly I iterated on this tool that I wanted to use. And we actually used it to save for buying a house, and each month we would reset the categories, and it actually worked. And my wife and I used it, and I built like a sharing feature so that my wife could have her categories that I couldn't see. I could have my categories, and we'd have our shared categories as well. And like you could create a new category and like share it, like, which is all like really normal standard stuff that we all do nowadays. Like, everything is like share this, don't share that, it's visible on this, like user access. And like I said, this would have been like 13 years ago that I was kind of muddling all this together. And like I started coding before Stack Overflow was a thing. And so a lot of this, I was just like muddling through. I was like, well, I suppose you could have like a shared table or an invites table, and you could put the invite to the category, and you'd have a join table to show that the invite had been accepted. And I looked at the code maybe a year ago for this app. I've still got it. Keep all your code, keep all the code you ever write, have it on your machine, have it in GitHub, right? Whatever. And I look back at it, and there was just some horrific SQL.
It's nightmarish. It's always nightmarish.
Exactly. But like it worked, and that was the most important thing. It worked. Like I wrote code that worked. Was it performant? Probably not. Was it the best way to do it? No. The code looked quite simple in places. Like I didn't use a lot of the shortcuts that you start to develop as you become more experienced. But it worked, and we saved and bought a house. So the end goal was achieved. The business objective was achieved.
Well, I think you mentioned it. Building that product forced you to learn certain things, and I think that is exactly that kind of route where I have an idea. Let's see if I can just get it out there, build that certain feature, and naturally, as you kind of follow your curiosity and you build certain features out for a product that you have in mind. Again, you naturally are forced to learn certain things. And I think there's only one, that is literally the only way to do it, in my opinion. You have to just sort of go for it and really sort of put yourself out there.
Yeah, and you'll make mistakes, and that's okay as well. I see a lot of people that I speak to, they're concerned about making a mistake, and it's like, well, firstly, there's Command Z or Control Z, so you can undo your mistake. You can also delete it. You can also start again, and you'll have also learned something from the mistake. Don't be precious about your code. Don't be precious about the approach you took. Just start writing code down. Build your 10,000 hours, even if that is a thing or it's not a thing. Just build your 10,000 hours. Just get coding.
Yeah, that's it. Everybody also gets super obsessed. I was, well, maybe it was just me actually. When I was a junior dev, I was obsessed with writing performant code for some reason, like super performant code, and we had a couple of users. It's
yeah.
It's just let's get something out there, let's ship it, and get more people using it. Then we'll worry about that later. Again, I think that it kind of is a trait for junior devs as well. Because essentially, when you're shipping code to GitHub and everybody else can see your code, it's kind of putting yourself out there a little bit, and it can be quite nervy, especially when you've just joined a new team. So again, I think it's just one of those you just kind of have to take that plunge and really go for it. I'm personally really interested to hear about your journey with all the code and kind of the other stuff that I guess you kind of done on the side, but also have there been full-time roles, would you say, or has it been something that you've just sort of chipped away at kind of on the side while also kind of progressing your career as in tech?
Yeah, so I mean, I guess My sort of very, very brief career history is finished PhD, founded a manufacturing business that I wrote a lot of code for, ran that for 8 years, shut that down in 2019, applied for over 200 jobs. Turns out when the only job you've had is running a business, you're not very employable. So it turned out I had this vocational skill of being able to code, got a dev job with the UK retailer. After a year and a bit, moved to a data science consultancy as a web dev, then went to an edutech startup after about 8 months. And the transition of the first to second job, I set up this Instagram account, which was just me like doing little carousels on Instagram about like what's a pointer, or all these kinds of reference first value type and what is Docker and that kind of stuff. And that was because I realized that I couldn't be a full-time employee for the rest of my life. I would need to go back into the kind of either independent software developer, freelancer, creator, or sort of founder level on a company. I like the diversity that comes with that. I like the challenges. I like talking about business as much, if not more, than I like sort of talking about code. But I was like, well, what's the thing that I can do on my own? Well, I've been told that I'm quite a good teacher, and so I was like, well, I'll talk to people about coding online, and let's just do that on the side. So I did that on the side for like 2 jobs, which was like 18 months, something like that, maybe a bit less. And then I went full time on that in March last year. So I'd had enough with my full-time dev job, and yeah, so I went full-time in March on all the code, focusing primarily on the Instagram side of things, so sponsored content, and then growing sort of courses on the side that would become sort of the foundation of a course platform. And that's why I made this free 30 days of JavaScript course, because I wanted that to be the thing that kind of brought people in, and then we could move on to React as paid and what have you. And then about halfway through the year, my old business partner that I'd worked with for 8 years and grown this manufacturing business and closed it down is probably the person that I've spent the most time with other than my wife. And, in fact, sometimes when you probably know this with your business partners and the people you co-found something with, you spend more time than you do with your spouse, and you go through massive highs and massive lows, and you sort of struggle. Yeah, and you struggle through horrible financial situations and horrible staff situations and all sorts. And so we had like a really, really kind of close bond. And he'd set this business up with his wife, and they'd been kind of growing that slowly and steadily. And then he said, "Hey, we're raising a round of investment, and I need a CTO. Would you like to?" I was like, Yes, I would. That would be
Nice.
good. I mean, I had to think about it a little bit, but I was like, I'd love to come back and kind of work. And I said, I'll move all the code to kind of on the side, but I'd made sure I'd set all the code up in a way that the value is still there in the website. I can talk about it and promote it and interact with the people that I need to. It just needs to be my full-time focus. And actually, after kind of doing it for a year full-time, I think I enjoy it more now than I did as a year full-time, because I get to dip in and out, and I get to help people and talk to people and teach people stuff, but I don't have the pressure of this pays my bills, and that does change the dynamic a bit. So it was very much, it was like on the side for a while, then became full-time, and now it's on the side again. And it's just one of those things that I think I'll always have, and it'll always be my way to kind of help people. And I really enjoy when people get in touch and they say, hey, I read this post you did a year ago, or I saw this reel you did 18 months ago, and I joined this boot camp, and then I did this, and now I'm earning, not literally, but £500,000 a year at Meta, and I'm like, excellent, good for you. Or I just got my first junior dev job, or whatever. And that's really awesome, because code can change people's lives, because it is a skill that you can learn without going to university. That doesn't mean that you shouldn't go to university if you have the opportunity and you're of, I think, the right age and it fits your life. I think there is value in university. But if you're coming to this later at 28, 35, 52, heck, 75, like whenever you want to come to code, it's all there for you. It's not magic. It's just time and effort and putting in the graft and wanting it. And that's why I love the kind of coding education careers intersection. I suppose it's just it's a very nice place to operate, and you can see that people get a lot out of that. Also, it reminds me of the magic of learning to code. You never get that magic back. Like, in a way, coders, devs are kind of like junkies in a way. They're searching for that first high of the first hello world, of the first time the first time you refresh a web page and what you just wrote to the database is still there. is magic. You never get to relive that moment ever again. And now
Yeah,
helping
yeah.
people to learn to code, I get to relive that moment with them, to see the understanding and the satisfaction they get. So that's why I sort of continue to do this, even though I have this full-time CTO role as well.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, it's super impressive the fact that you build it up to a point where you now feel like you can just kind of run it on the side whilst also being a CTO as well. Because being a CTO is that's a pretty full on role, to be honest. I mean, yeah, I'm sure Rob, who's our CTO, can vouch for that. Yeah, it's being a CTO at a startup of our size is it's not a 9 to 5.
No,
So
it's definitely not. It's definitely not 9 to 5. I think you guys are a little bit further down the path on the tech side than we are, but it is yeah. I mean, it's being a founder is living and breathing the company that you've founded, and when there's tech involved, it can be incredibly satisfying because the leverage that code gives you.
Yeah,
You can impact tens, hundreds of thousands, millions of people's lives
yeah,
from, really, if you want, one DigitalOcean droplet can
yeah.
can run that whole thing for you. I think that's pretty magic, really. The leverage that code gives you is pretty amazing.
So, is this your first CTO role?
So the job that I guess, yeah, it's first CTO. The company that we founded around for 8 years, I was technical director
Right.
of that company, and we co-founded that, and we raised venture capital up in the northeast of England. And so that was because that was manufacturing, that was physical products with code that I wrote to kind of fill in certain areas of the business. That wasn't really a company that would have a CTO. That was a technical director. And I could be doing anything in that. I could be writing code in the morning for our stock management application that I wrote in-house to manage purchase orders and that kind of thing, and production through the line. I then jump onto the production line and help the guys with a sticky order for a couple of hours. Then I'd talk about finance. Then we'd be looking at an email marketing campaign. Then I'd make the tea for a meeting that maybe I wasn't even involved in. Like it was a plethora of things. Yeah. Whereas I think with this one,
yeah,
so this one's a bit more
I
code focused.
I can completely sympathize with that. I think I've done every single job under the sun now at Haystack.
Yeah, because you're operation chief COO?
Yeah. So that's kind of the official job title. But I mean, there's still a few lines of code that I wrote for the Haystack app that I'm sure are probably still kicking about somewhere that are being used. It's probably the bit that breaks, to be honest.
Well,
bugs in there. I'll take the blame for that.
The CO, it's interesting if you've read the Phoenix Project, the book.
Yeah.
So I've actually just finished rereading that to talk about on my podcast with my co-host. I've been trying to get him to read it, and I've also got our CEO reading it as well. And I'd read it about 2 years ago, and I really enjoyed it. I've made a lot of people read it who aren't developers as well, because I think there's a lot of value in that book for non-developers, for non-IT people. The IT people that I've recommended it to, like traditional IT people, that they always send me a text message about a third of the way in saying this book is really stressing me out. Because it's ridiculously stressful. But the Phoenix Project it's more about how IT is core. It's the neural network of like the biological one, not an ML model of a company. And the end of that book is basically, the summary is, every company in 20 years time, their COO will have an IT or dev background, because how can you be the chief operations officer of a company where the primary source of what drives the operations is IT and not it's the tech, and actually it's not even just the dev, it's the IT platform. Whatever your infrastructure, whatever your stack is, if it's traditional racked servers or if it's cloud or if it's whatever, it's IT is the operations of your business. Whereas I think more historically, a finance person might become COO because finance is the fuel of the business, but IT is rapidly becoming more important.
Yeah, I think it's a different kettle of fish when you're working in kind of tech and SaaS, I think. But yeah, if people asking, that was the Phoenix Project for anybody that's
the Phoenix Project. That's the book to read.
It is one running the email forwarding system. The reason why I never get any offers. That's a low-key dig there. I'll pass that one on to Rob, our CTO. I think actually that might be him. So he can take the blame there. Just to rewind back onto the kind of the CTO point. How do you feel like, I guess, transitioning into that CTO role? I guess if we rewind back even further, when you landed that kind of first software engineering position, how did you kind of think being a CTO would be, if you know what I mean, and what are the actual differences to sort of living and breathing in that CTO role?
Yeah, so I coming into the CTO role to a company where there is tech, but it's all no code and low code tech, which is great because they've got hugely far without having to build a big mess of spaghetti code and systems and services. But at the same time, there's lots of processes that are reliant on tech and web services. And I'm the first thing I needed to do was start to work out how to isolate parts of the business in a way that they could have some more formal technology put around them. But the key
Mhm.
bit is only if it adds business value. There is no point getting rid of a Zapier just because code is better than a Zap.
Yeah,
Like if
yeah,
that Zap is making 4 Trello cards and a Google Drive thing and putting something in someone's calendar, etc., 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 and it's triggered off a Shopify order, as long as it's doing its job and I don't need to be involved, I'm not going to touch that Zap because
yeah,
Zapier
yeah.
makes sure that they can interact with the Trello API, the whatever API, etc. So what I needed to do was basically say, right, what's the biggest business thing that we need to solve right now? Well, it's a formalization of this area of the business. Okay. Well, what can we build to formalize it and shore it up a little bit in the short term? And then what of that do we then have to do in code? And depending on how much has to be done in code, how far do we let that scope creep? Because in theory, you could rewrite everything in code, but I don't want to learn the ins and outs of the Trello API if I don't have to. Maybe I do for a little bit. Okay, we'll do that. So it was kind of getting, you can tell I've just finished reading the Phoenix Project. It was a case of getting situational awareness. Like I needed
Yeah.
to get situational awareness of what is this business? Because I could come in and make a massive amount of damage and I could speak in essentially tongues to people that don't know about dev and IT and tech, and I could make it sound like it's the most complicated thing in the world and that I do the
Mhm.
most magical things in the world, and that all of this needs changing because it's all going to break and it's all going to fall down. But it's simply not true. I should
Yeah.
only touch the things that need code applying to them because as soon as I've written code for it, I've got to maintain it. Heaven forbid, I might have
Yeah.
to I might have to write a test suite around it as well.
Yeah.
Like I'm going to have to look after it and nurse it and make sure that it's okay. And I'm going to need to be the one that wakes up at 1 in the morning if something's gone horrifically wrong. It's unlikely with the type of
Yeah.
work that we do, but still, I don't really want a phone call at 10:30 on my day off in the morning saying, "Oh, this thing's broken. We got to deliver this order." I'm like, "Okay, fine. I did a bad job, right?" So that's been the core thing of like, where can I add the most value? And then I
Mhm.
didn't really worry about what tech to choose. I was like, I've used all 3 cloud providers and I've used it self-hosted servers on like Apache and stuff because I've been doing this for 15 years. So everybody
Yeah.
has who's been doing it that long. I was like, which one was my favorite? GCP. Great. Let's do GCP. Do they have a startups program? Yes, they do. Great. They all have startup programs. So
Nice.
I've
Yeah.
got
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of GCP credits, right? And then I was like, do I need a database? No, I don't, because Shopify kind of have a bit of a database that you can interact with. So I don't need to worry about a database. Do I
Yep.
need to use React? No, because I'm hacking a Shopify theme, so it's just HTML, CSS, and vanilla JavaScript. Brilliant. So I don't need to worry about the changes in a framework. Okay, do I need a backend? Yes, I kind of do need a backend. What backend am I most comfortable with? Nest.js
Mhm.
is the framework I'm most comfortable with, which is like a
Nice.
wrapper
Yeah. Yeah.
around Express. And
Yep.
so I'm doing it in that. And I was like, I'll just use the code that I can get going the fastest with. And do I need to containerize it? Yes, I do. I'll use the smallest, easiest Docker image that I could template that I can and put it into Google Cloud Run with an automated build pipeline. Perfect. Excellent job. But everything I'm doing is like, what's the next smallest thing I can do that is the
Yep.
easiest for me to do? Because right now it's just me. Now I know the people I want to employ in the future when we get to that point, but we need to get to that point first.
Yeah.
So I'm
Yeah.
not too worried. Like, yeah, I'd rather not have to rewrite stuff that I'm writing now, but if we have to for whatever reason, we'll do that then. Like, if something I've written
Mhm.
isn't perfectly performant, well, let's solve it when we find out. So, yeah,
Yep.
situational awareness and doing the next smallest thing that's easiest for me to do has been my kind of approach, really.
Yeah, yeah, makes sense. I think it's kind of there's a natural overlap at that stage where the CTO type position is almost like a product position as well,
Mm,
where like a product owner type position where you have to be close to your customers, you have to be super close to your users. And to be honest, even when I was a full time software engineer, that was one of the bits that I really liked. I actually really liked getting under the hood of how our customers were using things and and basically why am I building this feature. The last thing I wanted was for somebody to say we need this feature, like the noisy salesperson to come in shouting about this feature that everybody's requested. You spend weeks building it and nobody uses the thing. It's like it's a nightmare.
Yeah, because if you don't know why you're building something, you it loses your curiosity. Like one of the worst things you can do to any team or member of staff is remove their initiative. And it was something when I was running a manufacturing line, I was really physical manufacturing line, people sticking stuff together with like glue and plastic and what have you, right? And the core thing I wanted was to maintain their initiative, because if they don't have initiative, they don't know why they're building what they're building. They won't solve problems on the fly. They won't come up with better ways of doing it. And if you give a dev a task that's been completely 100% scoped, all the acceptance criteria are there, the user story is fleshed out to within an inch of its life, but you still don't know why you're doing it because it's been boiled down so far, that dev is going to be bored, and they're going to focus on, they're going to focus on things that don't matter. They're going to focus on things that matter to them, like using a new framework, like writing the most performant code, like using a data structure that nobody understands, right? Whereas actually, if they understand the use case of where it's going, why the user wants it, why the user wants to achieve what they're doing, and they are given some rope to kind of operate with, and they're not on such a tight leash, you'll get a better product at the end. And that's the most important thing. That's the most important thing for the business.
Completely agree. We're at a bit of an advantage because obviously Haystack is literally built for tech people, developers, DevOps engineers. So our dev team are super involved, and they always have that kind of a say on what the actual features are. But I remember when I used to work at a company called Hive, so we were always super focused on our customers, and what we do is we literally get all of our customers in one big room, and it's always like a mini conference, but it was kind of super one-to-one. All the devs would be there, and you'd literally have a chance to sit down and speak to the customers and find out about their problems and really get under the hood of it. And I think if you have that element where it's not, the dev team isn't just sort of tucked away to the side and they're there to just write code. That's it. There's actually like you need to give them the freedom to use their imagination and occasionally just build one of those Hail Mary features that can completely change the dial overnight. I think that's one of the biggest advantages of startups, in my opinion, versus kind of big enterprise customers. So big enterprise companies, they're behemoths, slow moving. Whereas a startup, you can just throw something out there where it might be a bit of a hunch that this could either go completely wrong and not work at all, or it could completely change everything. And I think if you give kind of the dev team the freedom to sort of try this kind of stuff and really understand the customer and the user, then you're onto a kind of winning solution there.
I think it's why of the three proper dev jobs that I've had, my favorite one was where I was writing internal tools. So it was a UK high street retailer, Bravissimo, they make ladies' underwear, and I was working in the warehousing internal systems department. And I wrote software for internal users. We had this huge ERP system, merchandising system, all of it made in-house. There were SQL stored procedures that were like 22 years old, like some of the original code written by the founders. And everything we wrote was for an internal user. So if I wanted to find out how the code I'd written for the returns department worked, I would just go up the road to the warehouse and go and speak to any of the people on the returns desk. Hey, how's that button working out for you? Is there anything else I can do for you? And then you find out, oh, do you know what? This list is always in the wrong order, and I have to scroll and scroll, and it's getting longer and longer. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, I can just reverse it. Like literally just do dot reverse, because it was in date order. It was just the wrong date order. I'll just do dot reverse on it and just reverse it. That was a real example. That was the first thing I shipped for that company, was on my induction in the warehouse. The lady I was talking to complained about this list. 2 days later, this thing that's been annoying her for a couple of years is solved. And it was tiny. It's a big deal for her because she interacted with that list like 100 times a day. And that's I really, really enjoyed writing internal tools for that company, because you could just go and speak to the people and you could find out what worked, what didn't. And sometimes it was frustrating. But any work has frustrating aspects. I would imagine in your case as well, with the sort of getting the team round and having your biggest customers in, the developers come out more energized.
Yeah, 100%. Definitely. Because it's a lot of it's just hearsay, because obviously they're not jumping on like kind of sales calls and customer calls. So they kind of have to take our word for it that people love what we're building. Whereas if you actually sit and speak to them, it's like, bloody hell, I've built something that's really making a difference. Yeah, I think that, I guess just on the point of kind of finding that company where you feel like you can really thrive. What were the flags that you would look out for when you're going through a job search where when you can really kind of hone in on a company and think this could be the next big thing for me? Because again, we are in my opinion, as techies and developers, DevOps, whatever it may be, we're very lucky in the sense that our skills are very much in demand. And I always encourage people on Haystack to be super self-selective. You need to go into it almost like you're interviewing the company, because you do have pick of the litter, and you need that confidence in yourself that I kind of am. The company has to put their best foot forward to find me, to attract me. So what were the kind of flags that you'd look out for when you're making that kind of career move?
So it's very difficult for me to say what I did, because I learned a lot in the process of me getting that first job, and the second job. So when I got my first dev job, I was not in a good I wasn't feeling confident. I'd applied for over 200 jobs across a variety of different areas, manufacturing, product, whatever. And it started to become very evident that I don't really have any marketable skills, because running a company for 8 years just isn't a marketable skill. But I can code. And so I just started applying to dev jobs, just any. And I think I landed the one with Brav at on application 12 or 13 or something. But I got lucky, and I think really I'd gone searching for dev jobs with such a kind of broad net that I just got lucky that really the company realized that I was the perfect fit for them because of my background. So what I wish I'd known back then, and what I now say to people in my position of being a career switcher, is you're a career switcher, even if you have been coding. I mean, I've been coding for a decade by that point, but I hadn't had a first dev job, right? You don't know if you're actually any good until you go into being a dev. What I wish I'd been told, and I say to people, is if you have a previous career and you've just learned to code, or you want to become a dev, apply into that industry, because you come in as a subject matter expert. The hardest thing we do as developers is not write code. The hardest thing we do as developers is understand the problem space that the users operate in, because that's not our problem space. You need to be empathetic. You need to understand what the space they're operating in. In theory, this is what a good product owner does. But most product owners don't necessarily do the best job of that, because they don't understand that impedance mismatch between being a developer and being a user. So if you come into being a dev, if you were a dentist before, go and apply for companies that make dental products or make dentist management systems. If you were a teacher, go and work for a publisher that writes textbooks or does school management systems or anything. If you worked in a retail store, go and apply to work in retail. If you were a warehouse worker, go and work somewhere or apply for places that make MRP and ERP systems, because you coming in as a brand new dev is a weakness. You coming in as a brand new dev as a subject matter expert in the area, you are going to be the product owner's favorite person, because you are going to have much better situational awareness of what the business is doing, what you should actually be doing. And then even if that isn't your dream job, maybe you do really want to go and work for Google. Great. That could be job 2 or 3, right? Get that first job on your CV, because once you've got the first job on your CV, it's so much easier to get the second, third, fourth, fifth, however many jobs you'd end up having as a dev. That first one is the hardest. So that's what you should be doing. Now, if you're a brand new dev, well, then just work out what companies align with your values. Value-based applications is really it's a really good way to, even if the area isn't something that you're fascinated by, maybe you're not bothered about manufacturing, but maybe you really like cars. Well, Jaguar Land Rover employ a lot of developers. So there you go. That could be a really good first place for you to go to, right? Maybe you have a hobby that you're really interested in, and you like. Maybe you're really into the gym, right? Fitness. Gymshark employ developers from junior devs, so go and apply for Gymshark, because it's going to align with your interests. That is a way that you can find something.
I completely agree with that. literally, like, I couldn't agree with it more. Actually, that was literally how I found my first job. It was a natural curiosity. I think again, follow your curiosity and lead. That'll naturally sort of guide you towards a sector that you're super interested in. But yeah, again, the good point about Gymshark and Jaguar Land Rover as well. Everybody, the thing is nowadays, everybody's a tech company. 9 times out of 10, they're going to need developers, which is kind of one of our, I guess, tenants at Haystack is, everybody thinks about Facebook, Google, Amazon. That's it, and like those are the tech companies. But actually, nope. There's a lot of cool companies out there that are doing some really, really cool things that aren't typically a tech company, but they've really sort of went head first and dove in and really kind of adopted this sort of technology first mentality. Just a heads up, everybody. If anybody has any questions, we've probably got about a couple of minutes left. So we'll get the questions in 2 minutes.
Yeah, I've just spotted. We got 3 in there.
Yep. Yeah. Tell you what, actually, we'll go over these first. So Richard said, as a recent bootcamp grad, should I be picky with job applications? So no remote, no relocation, selective industries, or go for anything to get my foot in the door. What do you think?
How desperate are you for a job? I know that sounds a bit callous and awful. If your back's against the wall and you've got 2 kids and a mortgage to pay, go and get any job. Go and get any job that makes your life work. If you're living at home with your parents and you don't have your back against the wall and there isn't a great big kind of pressure for you to move out or whatever, then yeah, you can be more selective. It comes down to your personal circumstances and how comfortable you feel trading off different things, which is a bit of a sit on the fence answer, but there is no one size fits all. Like if you're up to your eyeballs in debt, then okay, not as desperate. I'm living off savings. Okay, cool. Then yeah, start off a little picky, work out your personal savings runway, and then decide at what point you are desperate. You'll be surprised how well, depends how long you've been doing it for. You'll be surprised how dull it gets living off savings. It happens quicker than you think it will. You're like, oh, I've got 18 months. And then you're 6 months into withdrawing how much you need for the month. And you're like, oh, do you know what? I really don't like being negative. If you think about yourself as a business, that's not tenable for a business. You either need revenue or investment at some point. So yeah. I would start off being picky for what makes you feel comfortable, and then Richard start to let things slide off the table the more and more desperate you get.
Agreed. Actually, I'm assuming this is the same Richard, but Richard said he used to work as a product designer, so UI UX, so probably quite familiar with the space as well. So you're not going into it completely blind, and you probably work pretty closely.
I'd probably go to an agency. I'd probably go to an agency in that case because they get a much greater throughput of new products and new problem spaces to look at. So you'll be an asset to that team. Whereas if you're going into something with internal business tools that moves a bit slower and maybe has a smaller team, your previous experience is going to be less valuable. So I'd probably look at something relatively high throughput that's seeing a lot of new stuff all the time.
Good point. Actually, Richard, just a heads up. So we have a company on here. I can't remember the name of them now. There's a company on Haystack that we're literally looking for front-end developers with experience in design background. So if you just drop us a note,
Richard should apply for that.
Yeah. So if you literally just drop us a note in the app, and we can see if we can point you in their direction. So Sam mentioned a question for both of you. Did you experience any imposter syndrome, and what practical tips can you offer to deal with it? Do you want to go first?
Yeah, this sounds awful. I've never experienced imposter syndrome. I don't know if that's because I'm arrogant. I don't feel stress. I know that I know that I can just work. I am not a particularly I had to work from GCSEs. Like I wasn't one of the kids that coasted through GCSEs and A levels and just kind of landed up doing a PhD. Like I had to grind from GCSEs. So I know that I can just grind out the work. And so that's what I did. I just buried myself in the work. I was like, I am going to be the best new developer this company has ever seen. And I'm just going to work and work and work and ask questions and be open to everything and suggest improvements and just throw myself into the role, so that I was so busy and so immersed in the role. I didn't have time to wonder whether I should be there or not. Also, I was 32 and they were hiring people much younger and people who'd been developing for 6 months. So I had that slight unfair comparison. So I'm not sure if make yourself so busy you can't wonder whether you should be there or not, would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think the only time I've ever experienced imposter syndrome. So I'm kind of similar to you, Sam. I think I'm very self confident, which is either a good trait or a bad trait. But I have experienced imposter syndrome when I used to be a dev in my first junior dev position, so straight out of uni. So I guess to rewind, so I used to be a mobile app developer at Newcastle Uni whilst a student there. So I developed their like student app, which basically everybody used for like their timetable, for example. But then after that, I went into the role at Hive, which I previously mentioned, and the imposter syndrome that I got was when I would submit my code to GitHub and not know whether or not everybody wanted picture perfect code. So it was that kind of the nervousness around the quality of my code, which is why I'm always honing on just ship something, put some lines of code down and get it up there. It has to work, obviously, but it doesn't need to be picture perfect and doesn't need to be super performant. Whereas I kind of convinced in my head that everybody was expecting 10 out of 10 beautiful code all of the time. We're a startup. Our users wanted these features and they wanted them quickly. That was kind of the top and bottom of it. So I personally had to kind of get over that hump, to get over the imposter syndrome around the code that I was delivering. Okay, so Celine mentioned any tips for who already is in their first job and wants to get the second one. Well, I guess you've got your first job, which is great. So I think you've already got over the first big hurdle. I don't know if there's anything that you want to add to that one, but
yeah, start replying to the recruiters on LinkedIn that are messaging you, even if it is only one a week and it seems really generic. Just start. When I was applying for jobs, I went through recruitment agencies. Just pick up the phone. Haystack didn't exist back then, so of course, I didn't have that option, which is far better than what I'm suggesting now. But I'd pick up the actual phone, like I'd pick up an actual phone, dial an actual phone number, and ring a recruiter and say, "Hey, I'm looking for a job as a dev. It's job number 1, 2, or 3. Can you help?" The great thing about doing that, much like using an app like Haystack, is that you are applying to every client in their head that you don't need to know about, and they'll do the matching for you, much like a really great app will do for you.
Again, just to add to that, so again, you now have the luxury of being able to look around and browse and see what's out there. So time to be picky, time to be selective, hone in on what you want to do. Which sectors interest you, what tech do you want to work with, what salary do you want? Everybody dances around that topic, but salary is a big thing. People want to get paid for the work that they do. So have a think about the salary that you're looking for. You're in a good position. That's kind of the top and bottom of it, I think. Angelica, how do you convince employers to hire you if you have no experience but genuine interest in the solutions they provide?
Show how you can add value to their business, and that you happen to like using code to do that. I said this line earlier. They employ you to write code. They don't. They employ you to solve business solutions. Show that you understand their problem space better than any other developer they're going to hire. Show them that you understand their place in the market. Skip to about chapter 23 in the DevOps in the Phoenix project, where the CFO, Dick, I think his name is, lists his corporate objectives. Make sure you understand those corporate objectives for any company that you're desperate to apply for, and tell them that you can help solve that with code as part of their team and their existing objectives. And you'll be head and shoulders above any other developer that is applying to them. This is assuming you've got a hit list of a couple of companies. You can't do this deep dive on 55. You can only do it on a couple.
That's good knowledge. Chapter 22, did you say?
Literally finished it on the train yesterday. It was a very long train ride. I'm guessing it was about 2/3 of the way through, and it's a 35 chapter book. So yeah.
Good knowledge. Henry says, "How do you deal with procrastination?" To be honest, Henry, I would love to know as well, because that's a big problem for me.
I'm the worst person to ask. I've been described as the least procrastination. I've been described as the least procrastination affected person that people know. Like I just don't procrastinate. Like if you need to get something done, you've got the time to do it. Just get on and do it. The downside is there's a never-ending list of chores. So I have the opposite problem. If I can just kind of get too burnt out because there's always more to do than there is time to do it. But like honestly, just commit to doing 5 minutes to something. Once you've done 5 minutes of it, you'll be vibing with it and you'll get it done. And if you're not vibing with it after 5 minutes, you're going to do a bad job anyway. So come back to it later. Often take the pressure off yourself and you won't procrastinate.
Yeah, you need to get in that flow state, which people talk about. It's once you get, I think that 5 minute analogy is quite accurate. Actually, once you get going, you keep going.
It's the same as going to the gym. Once you've got your gym kit on and you're out the door, you're going to go and do a gym session. You know?
Yeah. I guess I'm always in the mindset as soon as I step into the office. So we're pretty much in the office most of the time now. But as soon as I step into the office, I'm in work mode. It's kind of a mindset shift, and it's exactly like going to the gym. As soon as you step into the gym, you're at the gym. The hard part's done. You just got to get through the session now.
Yeah, exactly.
Put your phone in a different room.
Well, see, I try that, but I've done that as well because I'm very good at not procrastinating, but I can get distracted by my phone. Hence the Instagram account with 100,000 followers, right? The downside of putting your phone in a separate room is two-factor authentication. It's like, oh, I'm not going to have my phone, and then you go to log into AWS or whatever. You're like, oh, two-factor auth.
Oh shit! I'm going to go and get my phone now.
Exactly.
Yeah. The other thing, I've always got about 10,000 tabs open, which is probably not great. Occasionally, I have to call some tabs, which is that usually seems to work. What else have we got? Do you believe everyone and anyone has the ability to code?
Yes.
Me too.
Not everybody has the ability to hold the most complicated infrastructure and systems in their head and have it all completely accessible at any given time. Like I do believe people have their amount they can hold in suspension in their head, but everybody can do it. It's just to which degree. Can everybody be an amazing developer? No, but not everybody can be an amazing accountant or dog walker or football or whatever, right? But everybody can do it, and everybody can do it more than well enough to have a very nice, comfortable career doing it. That's the thing you care about. After that, it's all just point scoring, really.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's different types of developer as well. You don't need to be the one who's like, I don't know, if you're super mathematical, you might be able to crank through algorithms like that. Whereas I never was. Again, I was more of that kind of feature-driven, product-driven developer. So that never particularly suited me. So yeah, find your niche and stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
I would say. Roy mentioned, so again, wouldn't be a fireside chat or a podcast without the mention of ChatGPT. With ChatGPT and other AI on the rise, will web developers be needed?
So we don't write code for computers. We write code for other human beings to fix and adapt and change later down the line. So you can use ChatGPT and Copilot and what have you to write the code, but eventually a human needs to read it and needs to understand it. And until we reach the point of general artificial intelligence that can do anything, then no, developers will still be needed, if nothing else, to make sure that the code that's being written is understandable and correct and going to do the job. And I don't know about you, but my least favorite part of being a dev is reading somebody else's code. I don't like reading ChatGPT's code. I don't like reading Google Copilot's code or GitHub Copilot's code. So I actually think ChatGPT was a product made and targeted specifically to developers, knowing that the developers would make cool stuff about it and drive it forwards. I think ChatGPT is particularly designed to be like crack for developers, and that's why you're seeing so much hype about it right now. I think in 18 months' time, when ChatGPT's written a lot of bugs and people are trawling through ChatGPT code and writing tests to reinforce and protect ChatGPT code, I think the shine's going to wear off. That being said, it's good fun. Like I do like using it, but it's not the panacea.
Yeah, I'm still writing mildly offensive limericks about Rob, our CTO. Through ChatGPT. It's
Excellent.
about 3 or 4 months down the line. I'm still doing it. I don't know why, but yeah. um, so we've already got a couple of minutes, so I'll just pick a couple of questions. So
I've got a really specific answer for Kazim, who has a really specific question about Go.
let's go for it. Do you want to
Okay,
read it out
so
while we're on?
yeah, so he's struggling to prove that they know enough Go to get a job with a company that does Go. The specific advice I can give here is go and check out boot.dev by a guy called Lane Wagner, who I interviewed on our podcast 2 weeks ago. He teaches new developers Python and Go. Which is unusual for a boot camp online learning platform. He's teaching new developers Go. He's probably going to hit him up on Twitter or something. He's going to give you some good advice that's specific to this case, where he probably knows this exact problem around Go because it's not that common a language that not a lot of companies use. So he should have some more specific advice for you there.
Funny enough, there's a few companies on Haystack who are looking for Go developers, and if you are a Go developer, you are like absolute gold dust at the minute for those guys. So yeah.
To be honest,
Any
same as an Angular developer. Like
yeah,
there's a lot of
yeah,
Angular code that needs writing, and there's not actually that
yeah,
many Angular devs anymore.
yeah. That
Yeah,
was where I started out actually with Angular.
yeah, same
Um,
for front end stuff.
yeah, yeah. Any other questions that you want to cherry pick while we're on?
I think we got to the end of them, didn't we? Oh, with which chapter was it again? About 22. Where can we find my book and courses? Allthecode.co. Will the recording be available after the stream? I've no idea.
One from Sama, which he says, what do you think the outlook of the industry is here in the UK and abroad, with home working allowing for more opportunities abroad?
So, and the follow-up point to that is also access to cheaper labor from countries like India and Pakistan. There is a great reshoring effort going on, which is bringing IT from offshore, i.e., the cheaper countries you're talking about, back to the UK and Europe and America, because it turns out communications and time zone differences actually more than absorb the saving that you often make with the offshoring effort. So I don't see that being any more of an issue than it has been for the last 20 years. And in fact, I think it's becoming a bit less of an issue because soft skills, I don't like that they're called that, communication skills, time management skills, etc., being in roughly the same time zone, they more than make up for those cost savings. What do I think the outlook is for the industry in the UK? I'm not supposed to say this because we're supposed to be positive all the time. I have no idea. The UK is odd at the moment and has been odd for a few years. I can't possibly think what I'm referring to, but it's been odd since about 2016, 2017 era when we all were asked a question. I don't know, and I wish I did because yeah, I think it'll be fine because it usually is fine. But I think the best thing you can do is develop your tech skills, make yourself super marketable, and be prepared to work, wherever you can and you want in whatever industry. You make up for whatever the economy is doing with having exceptionally marketable skills. Learn to code, basically, is the way you can make up for the economy doing whatever it's going to do.
Yep. I think history says that everything will be fine. So I'm going to go with that.
I agree. Most things get better.
Yeah. One thing I would say just on that, and again, we've seen it with employers on Haystack, the pendulum is starting to swing back a little bit when it comes to remote working. I think there's more employers that seem to want more of a hybrid approach, where it's like, again, when I say hybrid, it could literally be a couple of days in the office a month. But it's not, everybody hasn't all of a sudden swarmed towards hiring everybody from across the globe. I think people do still value that face-to-face time to an extent, definitely on the lower end of the spectrum with startups, especially. But yeah, I think I think a degree of hybrid is probably where everything's gonna fall, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. I think we're pretty much at the end. I guess we can maybe fit it in.
I'm reading it as well.
Yeah, we've got one
Stephen,
more. Should we just wrap it up with that one more question?
Yeah, I'll give a quick answer. Stephen, feel free to email
Yeah.
me at simon@allthecode.co, and we can pick up more on it. Do I have any advice regarding how to move from being a very experienced developer to understanding how to become a CTO as the next step? Yeah, you've got two routes. You can apply to be a CTO at an existing company. The best route is often to look at venture capital-backed startup portfolios. Downside is you will need to prove that you can do the job of being a CTO. That's not the same as being a developer. You are much more outward facing as a CTO. You are looking at more longer term business strategic things and how technology interfaces with that to then disseminate that internally into the technical structure of the company. The other thing is to found something, because basically nobody checks your CV when you go and found something, and basically the roles never actually get reviewed later down the line, and you kind of get to do whatever you want. So that's the other route, but obviously the downside of that is you might have to go for like a year or two without earning very much money. So yeah, if you want some more specific stuff, then hit me up on simon@allthecode.co and I'll happily to reply.
Yep, good stuff. Well, I think that's the end of it. So a few people have been asking basically where can they connect with you, where can they find you? So what's the best place?
Find me on Instagram if you're there at allthecode, just allthecode, one word, or find me at allthecode.co is the website. Don't use the Typeform form. Just guess my email address. You're smart. You're all smart because you're here, right? It's my name at allthecode.co. Please don't use my Typeform credits. They're there for people that don't understand how email addresses can be guessed, right?
Good stuff. What we'll do, so we'll send around a recording of this. Feel free to pass it on to any friends, whoever it is that couldn't make it. And yeah, like I say, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or drop us a note on Instagram or fire us a message in the app as well. Good stuff. Thanks, Simon. Much appreciated, mate.
Cool. Catch you later.
Cheers.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.